Hi, everybody. It's Mrs. Small, and I'm going to read another book to you all. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It's called Curious George Goes to the Hospital. And you see the condition of this book? It looks pretty dirty and everything, but you know why? Because this is a book that Mrs. Small has had since she was a little girl, and my grandmother used to read this very book to me when I was your age. So it's very dear to me, even though it looks a little worn out. So I'm going to read it to you all. And the inside cover looks like this. It shows all of George's adventures in the book. And I can remember looking at these pictures as a little girl and thinking about the book after my grandmother read it to me. Curious George Goes to the Hospital by Margaret and H.A. Ray. Those are the authors, which, as you know, is the person who wrote the book. It says, "This is George. He lived with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey, but he was always curious. Today, George was curious about the big box on the man's desk." And it shows George looking at a box. And it says he's curious. Do you all know what curious means? Curious is something that can be a very good thing, but it can also get people into trouble. When you're curious, it means you're very, very interested in something. What could be in it? George could not resist. He simply had to open it. It was full of funny little pieces of all sorts of shapes and all sorts of colors. George took one out. He looked at it, and it looked like a piece of candy. See, he's looking in the box, and he took a piece out, and it looked like candy to him. Maybe it was candy. Maybe he could eat it. George put the piece in his mouth, and before he knew it, he swallowed it. Oh no, look, guys. He took a piece out and he put it in his mouth and he swallowed it. Look, he looks so scared. Oh my gosh, has anyone ever done anything like that? Put something in your mouth and all of a sudden you swallow it? It is really scary. Very scary. A while later, the man with the yellow hat came home. "Why, George," he said, "I saw you had already opened the box with the jigsaw puzzle." So that's what it was. It was a jigsaw puzzle. "It was supposed to be a surprise for you. Well, let's go work on it." And look, he's on the man's desk with the puzzle. Finally, the puzzle was finished. Well, almost finished. One piece was missing. Do you remember what happened to that piece? Look at George. I think he knows what he needs to do. The man looked for it everywhere, but he could not find it. "That's strange," he said. "It's a brand new puzzle." "Well, it cannot be helped. Maybe we'll find it in the morning. Let's go to bed now, George." And look, George is even helping the man look for it, but he knows exactly where it is. It's in his tummy, right? The next morning, George did not feel well. He had a tummy ache and did not want to eat his breakfast. Look, he's holding his tummy. The man looks very concerned. The man was worried. He went to the telephone to call the Dr. Baker. "I'll be over as soon as I can," said the doctor. Oh, the doctor makes house calls. Do you think that doctor is a real doctor, or do you think that doctor might be a veterinarian? You know why I say that. Because George is what? He's a monkey. So do you think you'd bring a monkey to a regular pediatrician, a regular children's doctor? Oh, look at this. First, Dr. Baker looked down George's throat and felt his tummy. When he took out his stethoscope, which is that around his neck, and listened, "I'm not sure what's wrong," he said. "You better take George to the hospital and have an x-ray taken. I'll call them and let them know you're coming." So they're going, you can tell this is an older book, you guys, because look at the phone. You don't have that kind of phone anymore, do you? You all have iPhones and things like that. "Don't worry, George," said the man when they were driving to the hospital. "You have been there before when you broke your leg. Remember how the nice doctors and nurses were?" George held his big rubber ball tight as they walked up the hospital steps. And look at that. They're walking into the hospital. And you can see the car, a lady with a baby. Everything is very, very, oh, and the hospital is pink. Notice that? A nurse took them to, oh, look at this. Mrs. Small wrote all over this book when she was a little girl. That's not good, huh? A nurse took them down a long hallway to a room where she gave George something to drink that looked white and tasted sweet. It's called barium, the nurse explained. It helps the doctors find out what's wrong with you, George. In the next room stood a big table, and the doctor was just putting on a heavy apron. Oh, look at that. He's getting a little drink. I don't know if any of you have ever had that stuff before. It's so they can look in his tummy with the x-ray. It says, then he gave the man in the yellow hat one just like it. George was curious. Would he get one too? No, he did not. You get on the table, George, the doctor said. I'm going to take some x-ray pictures of your insides. He pushed a button and there was a funny noise. There, now you may get up and we will have the x-rays developed right away. So I don't know if you all have ever had an x-ray, but that's pretty close to what it looks like. That was an old-fashioned x-ray machine, but it's still the same idea. Now let's see. There is something that should not be, said the doctor when he was looking at the x-rays. Oh my goodness. Why, that looks like, I think that must be the piece that was missing in your jigsaw puzzle yesterday, said the man. Well, 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 said the doctor. At least we know what's wrong with your little patient. I'll tell Dr. Baker right away. George will have to stay at the hospital for a few days. They'll put a tube down his throat to get the piece out. It's only a small operation. I'll call the nurse and have her take you to the admitting office. So you can see the x-ray. There's George's stomach. And there's the little piece of the puzzle. Oh my goodness. Many people were waiting outside the office. George had to wait too. Look, Betsy, a woman next to him said to her little girl. There's Curious George. Betsy looked up for a moment. She did not even smile. Betsy had never been to a hospital before. She was scared. So you can see here the waiting room. And there's George and the man with the yellow hat. And there's Betsy. See, she has a frown on her face. She had never been to a hospital before and she was really scared. So I wonder if George can help out. So they're all getting admitted into the hospital. I don't know if you all have ever been to a hospital before or ever been in the hospital yourself, but it can be a scary thing. But you know, when you go to a hospital, the doctors and nurses are always so nice and they can always help you. Or the people you're going to visit, they're trying to help those people too. Finally, it was George's turn. A pretty young nurse took him to the next room. My, how many rooms and how many nurses there were. One nurse wrote down a lot of things about George, his name and his address and what was wrong with him. Another nurse put a bracelet around his wrist. It has your name on it, George, she said, so everyone knows who you are. So they're admitting him, and his friend with the yellow hat is talking to one of the nurses, and he's getting the bracelet put around his wrist. And if you've ever been to the hospital, you know that the whole time you're there, you have to have that bracelet on your wrist so they know exactly what you're there for. Then the pretty young nurse came back. My name is Carol, she said. I'm going to take you to your room now. We call it the children's ward, and I'll put you to bed. There will be lots of children to keep you company. And so see, the nurse is taking him down the hallway with the man, and she has his ball in her hands. And they're going down the hallway to find his room. At any time, you guys, if you want to stop, if you want to pause this and look at the pictures a little bit longer, you can do that on your end. And so it was. There were a lot of children in the room. Some were up and around. Others were in their beds with a doctor or nurse looking after them. Dave was having a blood transfusion. Steve had his leg bandaged and was sitting in a go-kart. Betsy was in a bed looking sad. George got into the bed next to Betsy. So this is the boy having a blood transfusion. And this is Betsy looking very sad. So I think this is probably going to be George's bed. Then you see these other kids here. There's the little boy that has a broken leg and is in, they call it a go-kart. And then there's a boy with a bandage on his head and little girl on the ground. And over here it shows somebody was coloring a picture. And look, there's an airplane on one of the beds, and the nurse is bringing the monkey in. That's some kind of scene. I love those pictures. Wonder what's going to happen next. Oh my goodness. George was glad when he was in his bed at last. His tummy was hurting again. The man sat with him for a little while. "Now I have to leave you, George," he finally said. "I'll be back first thing in the morning before they take you to the operating room. Nurse Carol will tuck you in when it's time to sleep." Then he left. George just sat there and cried. Oh my goodness, he's so sad that the man had to leave. Look, no, don't leave. He's very, very sad. As he promised, the man was back early the next morning. The nurses were keeping George very busy. One nurse was taking his temperature. One nurse was taking his blood pressure. One was giving him a pill to make you sleepy, George, she said. And one was getting ready to give him a shot. Oh no. Look, you guys. She's doing that. And oh no, he's not going to like to get a shot. Do you think? Let's see what happens. Oh, look at this picture. That speaks 1,000 words, doesn't it? Oh my goodness. It says, "It's going to hurt, George," she said, "but only for a moment." She took his arm and George let out a scream. "Ah!" "But the needle hasn't even touched you yet," said the nurse, laughing. "There, now it's done. That wasn't so bad, was it?" No, it wasn't. And anyway, it was over now. So look, he got his Band-Aid after his shot. A lot of you have had shots, I know. I've seen your Band-Aids when you come to school the next day. By the time the attendant came with the stretcher to wheel him to the operating room, George was getting sleepy. He tried hard to stay awake. He was curious to see what would happen next. So you see all the kids are wishing him good luck. They're all out there, and he's getting wheeled into the operating room. And the man with the yellow hat is with him also. He could see a big table with bright lamps over it and doctors and nurses all around. They had caps on their heads and masks over their faces, only their eyes were showing. One of the doctors winked at George and patted his head. It was Dr. Baker, who had been in the house when it all started. He looked funny with his mask on, and then George was fast asleep. Wow, look at this. All these pictures. So they're wheeling him in. This doctor's washing his hands. There's Dr. Baker. You can tell because he has his glasses on. And look at the operating table with the lights and all the equipment and the nurses. And this man is putting on some gloves. And look, there's the man with the yellow hat. Has to stay outside of this operating room. This is an old-fashioned operating room. They don't really look like this anymore. They look there's a lot more electronic equipment now. Like the lights don't look like that. You know, they're all encased and have wires and everything. When George woke up, he did not know what had happened. He did not even know where he was. Then he saw Nurse Carol. "It's all done, George," she said. "They got the piece out. In a day or two, you'll be running around again." The man had brought him a picture book, but George felt sick and dizzy. His throat was hurting, too. He was not even curious about the new book. He closed his eyes again. "We'll let him sleep," said Nurse Carol. "The more sleep, the better." So if you've ever had an operation and you wake up, the anesthesia that makes you go to sleep, that's what makes you feel a little sick when you first wake up. But look at who's next to him. That little Betsy that was so sad. The next morning, George felt better. He even ate a dish of ice cream. Dr. Baker came in to see him, and the man, of course, came too. Betsy was watching him from time to time. She seemed a little less sad, but she still did not smile. Steve wheeled his go kart over to George's bed. Tomorrow I can get up and try to walk, he said. Boy, I can hardly wait. So you could see he was eating some ice cream. Why do you think his throat hurt? Do you remember in the beginning of the story when they said what they were going to have to do to him? Do you remember? Remember they said they were going to have to stick a tube down his throat to get that piece out? Well, when they stuck that tube down his throat, it probably scratched his throat a little bit, and that's why his throat hurt when he first woke up. So they gave him ice cream to make it feel better. Kind of like if any of you have ever had your tonsils out. That's really hurts when you first wake up. And then they give you ice cream and things like that. And popsicles. I'll take you to the playroom now, George, Nurse Carol said the next morning. And in the afternoon, your friend will come and take you home. The playroom was full of children. A lady was showing Betsy how to use finger paint. There were all sorts of things to play with, even a puppet theater. And that was just the thing for George. He had 4 hands, so he could handle 4 puppets at the same time. So here's the playroom, and Betsy is finger painting, and he's finding the puppet theater. There's a couple of kids watching TV and kids looking at picture books, and there's Steve in his go-kart. George gave a real puppet show with a dragon, a clown, a bear, and a policeman. The children laughed and shouted. Even Betsy, for the first time, smiled a little. So you can see he has the puppets on every one of his hands, and he's doing the puppet show. And look at the kids are having such a good time watching him. That is so cute. He's using every single one of his hands. There was a TV in the playroom and also a record player. George was curious. He climbed on the record player and turned the switch. Some of you have never seen one of these, and that's something Mrs. Small grew up with. And it plays a thing called records that would play music. Like if you have a CD player, you put that in. But this was a record player. And then look at their TV. They don't look like that anymore either. It would go round and round like a merry-go-round. It did. It started slowly and went faster and faster, and whoopee! George had lost his balance and was sailing through the air. Oh no. See, because a record player goes around, and then that little needle goes on the record and plays the record. So he was using it like a merry-go-round. Oh my goodness. Luckily, George landed on a soft cushion. The children cheered, and Betsy smiled again. George was so funny. But then the play lady picked George up. That's enough for now, she said. You better take a nap before lunch. We have a big day ahead of us. The mayor is coming to visit the hospital today, and later on you will be going home, George. When George woke up, Steve was just taking his first steps. The nurse was helping him, and the children were watching. The go-kart was standing there empty. George was curious. He looked at it, then he climbed onto it. Oh no. So look, you see him landing on the pillow after he did that, and then the nurse carrying him off to go take a nap. Then when George woke up, the children are watching Steve take his first steps, but uh-oh. What happens when a monkey gets in a go-kart like that? I don't think it's going to be good, you guys. Oh no, I was right. Then he grabbed the wheels, and then, while nobody was looking, he wheeled the go-kart right out of the room. Look at him right there. Uh-oh. Steve is still taking his steps, and so nobody's watching him. George could make the go-kart go very fast. This was fun. Down the hall he went. By now the nurse had noticed that he was gone and came running after him. George, George, she shouted. Oh my goodness, look. He's having a blast. That nurse is really scared. But George was too excited to listen. He wheeled around the corner and down the ramp to the floor below. There were some men busy pushing lunch carts, a lot of doctors, and, oh no, nurses were showing the mayor around. So look at that. Here he comes running. He was right up here and he went all the way down like that. Look, here comes the mayor and all these lunch carts and everything. Oh no. What do you think's gonna happen? George tried to stop, but it was too late. Wham! The go-kart landed right in the middle of everything. Lunch carts tumbled. Spinach and scrambled eggs and strawberry jam were all over the floor. People fell over each other, and George was thrown out of the go-kart and landed right in the mayor's arms. Look at that scene. Look, there goes George flying into the mayor's arms. Oh my goodness, look at this mess, you guys. Look at all of this, them running after him. Oh, that's a mess. Look, there's the children up there watching. Oh my goodness gracious. Betsy came down the ramp, threw her arms around George and kissed him. "Don't be sad, George," she said. "The whole thing was so funny. I never laughed so much in my life. I'm so glad you were in the hospital with me." Now the director of the hospital spoke. "I am sorry this happened, Mr. Mayor," he said, "but I think we'll just clean up the mess and be done with it." "George," he went on, "you made a terrible mess, but you also made our sad little Betsy happy again. And that's more than any of us had done. And now I see your friend has just come to take you home. So goodbye, George, and take care of yourself." So look, Betsy, who had been so sad the whole time, was so happy now. And look, they're cleaning up the mess and everything's going to be okay. It's just a mess. Nobody got hurt. The children crowded around the windows waving goodbye when George and the man with the yellow hat were finally leaving the hospital. As the car was turning into the driveway, Nurse Carol came running after them. "Here's a little package with something that belongs to you, George," she called, "but don't open it before you get home." So look, all the children are waving goodbye and Emily. And there's a little boy like, "Monkey, monkey." And then here Nurse Carol is running out with a little package for him to take home with himself. She said, "Don't open it until you get home." I wonder what it could be. George was curious. Well, who would not be? The minute he reached home, he ripped the paper off, tore open the box, and there was the piece of the puzzle that had caused all the trouble. Look at that. He opened the box and there's the piece of puzzle they were missing that he swallowed. "How nice of the doctor to save it for us," said the man with the yellow hat. "And now we can finish the puzzle." Oh, look at what the puzzle is. It's a monkey in a yellow hat. Wonder where they got that puzzle, huh? Oh, and then it says "The End." And it shows him with a piece of puzzle in his hand. I hope he's learned his lesson and he doesn't eat that piece. Oh, this was such a good book, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy reading to you all. And like I said, you can stop this video at any time when you want to and look at the pictures a little closer. And you can listen to this video as many times as you want. I'm going to try to put other books on here for you all to watch. And I'll try to do it every day if I can. So we can meet every day. And I miss you all so, so much. But I will see you very, very soon. Have a wonderful day, boys and girls. I love you.